books. And that is an interesting thing because this word chassof also means to take from the surface. Most of our commentaries that we find at these fine stores like Lifeway and Martell's, love going through there and looking at the art and stuff. Most of the commentaries that we read today are superficial. They're based on what you read in the English, and that's as far as it goes. They'll give you a history lesson of what happened or what they perceive was being said, as opposed to paying attention to the language that it was written in and trying to understand it from Elohim's point of view. The Zohar, and I don't do a whole lot of mentioning of Kabbalah and all that other stuff because it's not something that anybody should study unless they've got a solid grounding in Torah. They should stay away from that stuff. But the Zohar, one of the books of that, says, woe to the person who sees the Torah as being simply stories and narratives. We've learned a lot about Noah and the ark and the flood over the last year. We've learned a lot about the plagues of Egypt. We've learned a lot about the assemblies in the Revelation. So we see that there's a lot more to it than simply a story. And that's very important for us to keep in mind. The next phrase is, and cast it down, from the word vehishlich, that literally means to throw away. The effect of this is very clear from the Paleo-Hebrew. We have an illustration there that the shin, we see two teeth, that means squeezing, choking, pressuring. So choking of, and there is the lamed, which is a shepherd's goad. So the choking of instruction, and there's the kaf, that's a palm that represents blessing. So the choking away of instruction and blessing. And this idea brings us to the cause of this found in the next phrase, the branches thereof are made white. We say, well, that can't be bad. They're made white. They're made pure. It's great. The word for white is laben, that means white, but its root illustrates the problem. And the root of laben is lebenah, that means brick. And anytime we see brick in the Torah, it's a type of or a representation of something made by human hands. It represents the carnal side of the atom. They were making bricks out of straw. It represents physical labor. They were building the tower. So it represents the physical side, the carnal side of the atom, which Adam's not the name of the first guy. He doesn't become Adam as a person until the 4th chapter. Adam represents the whole of humankind. All of us, we're all Adam. We're just separated into Ish, male, and Isha, female. So everything that we've considered to this point is because the Adam has succumbed to the carnal side of existence, having cast away the spiritual side that links him to Yahuwah Elohim. This takes us back to, again, Bereshit 2:7, that Yahuwah Elohim formed the Adam from the dust of the ground. The root of Adam is Edom, that means red clay. Formed the Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the Adam became a living being, a living soul. But we were formed by the potter into a vessel to receive his spirit, to receive his anointing, so that the Ruach could come down and ignite the anointing oil and bring forth light in us. But in Vayikra, what happens when a vessel touches something that's not clean? Well, it's broken and thrown away and a new one's made in its place. What happens when the clay is marred in the hands of the potter? He reshapes it and he reforms it. And this is why Yahshua was in the house of Shimon the potter, that we can go into the potter's house and receive the redemption, deliverance, and restoration that comes from Yahuwah, because that's what Yahshua means. It's interesting, it's Shimon the potter, that the root of Simon is Shema. And Shimon, the first fruit of Shimon is Shamar. That means to guard, protect, all those things that we talked about earlier. Keep, guard, protect, make sure to watch over, pay close attention to. And the root of that is Shema, which we're going to talk about in a second. So anyway, where were we? Okay, made white. So we get this idea of the carnal side of human beings that gets to be the problem. We have to go back to the potter's house and be reformed. So everything that we've considered to this point is because the Adam succumbed to the carnal side of existence, having cast away the spiritual side that links him to Yahweh Elohim. If we can't be filled as a vessel, then we can't be linked to our Elohim. This has affected the branches in a serious way. The word used for branches in this verse is sarigeha, that from its root sarag means to become intertwined or to be tangled. Consider what Yahshua taught about the good seed that falls amongst the weeds. He pointed out that as soon as the seed sprouts up, it's choked and deprived of the water because the weeds take up all the water. We considered this in Paleo-Hebrew from the word vehishlik, that means to throw away, that we considered the choking of the instruction and the blessing. And in Devarim, we read about the blessings found in keeping the word and the curses for not keeping the word. And we talked about in last week's Torah portion, when we talked about Vayikra 26, we read about all the ifs. And there were 5 ifs in that Torah portion. But in that Torah portion, if we'll read chapter 26 of Vayikra, or Leviticus, we see what happens of the blessings and the ordinances if we keep the statutes, ordinances, and commandments of Yahweh. And then we also see in that chapter the consequences of not keeping them. If we don't keep them, this is going to happen. If we keep them, this is what will happen. And that's what we talk about in that 26th chapter of Vayikra. So being able to recognize this condition is the key to redemption, deliverance, and restoration. To blessed are the poor in spirit. We have to be able to recognize that we're in a state of spiritual poverty before we can do anything about it. The first thing we do about it, and keep this in mind for our next verse, is that we mourn. We mourn. We recognize our spiritual poverty, and it's enough to make us cry out. It says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And when we mourn, it humbles us. Blessed are those who are humble, for they shall inherit the earth. That our existence here in our life is going to be made complete through Yahuwah Elohim, because we are taking the time to recognize that we've strayed away. But the next verse, if we keep that in mind, says, lament like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the husband of her youth. Now, based on everything that we've learned over the last couple of years, some of this stuff should make some sense. But to lament is to cry out in grief. The word for lament in this verse is Eli, but the root of this word is Allah, that means to take an oath or to be put under oath. So we cry out because of an oath. This concept should bring us to consider this question: have I kept my oath to Yahuwah Elohim? Our oath, according to Yahshua, is the first and greatest commandment, and it is this. From the Hebrew, Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad. We simply read it as, Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah our Elohim, Yahuwah is Echad, He's one. Now, we've talked about the Shema in detail in our other studies, but since we're considering Yoel, that means Yahweh is Elohim, we have to take some pieces of it and consider it one more time so we can grasp this verse. The word Shema, for hear, means not only to hear, but it also means to pay careful attention to be able to distinguish, to understand, to obey, and to apply, and then to be content that Elohim is greater than I am, because it says Shema Yisrael.